event with Rachel Griffin and Alexis Henderson. Before we get started, hi, I'm Julia from Itinerant Literate Books, just from North Charleston, South Carolina. We're so glad so many of you are joining us and watching the chat over here. Everyone's very excited. Yay! So just to give a brief overview of how tonight will go, we're going to have a quick moderated discussion with Alexis and Rachel, where we're going to talk about both their books, The Year of the Witching and The Nature of Witches, as well as some fun questions about witchcraft and writing craft. And remember, you can throw your questions into the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end where we'll ask the authors anything you put up there. Don't worry, we're going to jot them down as we go. And then, I think, and then that's the event. So I'm really excited. Everyone's so excited. And before we get started, I did want to say that I got very into the witch theme, and I made a cocktail from Witchcraft Cocktails, which is a super cool book that, like Rachel's book, is based on the seasons. So this is the cocktail. It's the Lucky Charm. And I wished for good luck tonight on tonight's event.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay, so we are joined tonight by Rachel Griffin, who lives just outside of Seattle with her husband and dog, Doppler. She was fortunate enough to witness the 2017 total solar eclipse, which, if you've read the book, comes into play, which was very fun, and became a certified weather spotter for the National Weather Service while doing research for this project. The Nature of Witches is her debut, and you can visit her online at her website. And we are also joined by Alexis Henderson, who is a speculative fiction writer with a penchant for dark fantasy, witchcraft, and cosmic horror. She grew up in one of America's most haunted cities, Savannah, Georgia, very close to us here in Charleston as well, which instilled in her a lifelong love of ghost stories. Currently, Alexis resides in Columbus, Ohio, where she's learning to cope with the cold. How is that going in Columbus?
Touch and go. I'm happy that it's summer.
Good. Yeah, I've lived in the South my whole life, so I have no idea. I think maybe Rachel can tell us more about the cold.
The Pacific Northwest actually is pretty mild as well, though we have been getting a lot of snow in the past few years.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like I just can't with the snow.
Yeah, Seattle as a city is definitely not prepared to handle the snow.
Wow, that's so fascinating because I feel that about Charleston also. So I guess, Alexis, you're the only one prepared for snow in Columbus.
Sort of. I think I need to move to Seattle next.
Yeah, come to Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to let you guys get started first by just giving a quick overview of the books, since some people might not have read them yet, especially since Rachel, yours came out on Tuesday. So Rachel, why don't you kick us off and give us a little synopsis of The Nature of Witches?
Great. Yeah. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm so excited you're here. So this is the book that came out on Tuesday. And just in case any of you have not seen the amazing stamped hardcover case, it's so beautiful. So The Nature of Witches is a young adult contemporary fantasy, and it is set in a world where witches have long maintained the climate and they're now starting to lose control of it. It follows Clara Densmore, who is an Everwitch. Her rare magic is tied to all 4 seasons, and she's the only witch who is strong enough to stabilize the collapsing atmosphere. But her magic is able to target and go after the people she cares for most. And when she falls in love with a spring witch, she has to choose between this magic that the world desperately needs and this boy that she has come to love.
So good. It's a great book. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I am the author of The Year of the Witching. This is a dark fantasy / horror novel, and it follows our main character, Emmanuel Moore, who's a shepherdess up in a theocratic society that's very oppressive and rigid, and it's ruled by this prophet who's a pretty bad guy. And Emmanuel is lured into the forbidden forest that surrounds her home, and there she uncovers dark secrets about Bethel, the place she grew up, through the witches that abide there. So there's lots of cosmic horror and blood and gore and a little romance too. So yeah.
It's So good. If you guys have not read The Year of the Witching, it was one of my absolute favorite reads of the past few years. So definitely pick it up. And Alexis, I'm so excited we're doing this together because I'm just a huge fan of yours.
Thank you. Likewise. I feel like it was like destined to be. I'm just thrilled to be here talking with you. It's so exciting. I feel like we've been Instagram friends sort of for a while now. So it's great to like see your face live.
Yes, exactly. I've just been so looking forward to it.
You guys are so great. I love this. Okay. I'm going to go into the first question, which is, I mean, a little unoriginal, but both of your books about witchcraft. So I wanted to kind of ask the witchcraft question first. They both are very different kinds of witchcraft and like very different place settings, which I feel like kind of feeds into the type of magic that you went with. So I'd love to hear more about first, like what drew you to witchcraft in general. And then second, what for the specific book, why that type of magic and why the place that went along with it. Is that, hopefully that's concise enough. Yeah. Alexis, do you want to start off?
Yeah. I think what drew me to witchcraft was primarily the fact that I grew up in a fairly kind of conservative religious environment, and everything that was kind of dark seemed all the more alluring to me because of that. Witchcraft particularly felt very forbidden because of this focus on kind of like female empowerment and the occult. Not just female empowerment though, witchcraft is for everyone, but I would see sort of this like female archetype in the witch, a woman who is so empowered, and I was really, really drawn to that. Even from like childhood, I loved like Ursula from The Little Mermaid, and I kind of secretly wanted to be like her. And so I think that that's kind of why I was initially drawn to witchcraft and why I chose to write about it. And in The Year of the Witching, I kind of wanted the magic system to reflect my own experiences with witchcraft. So I sort of focused on kind of like a loose folk magic, and that just seemed fitting for the world that I had created, which is kind of loosely based on kind of like more fundamentalist patriarchal religions.
Yeah, should I just dive in?
Yes, please do.
Okay, perfect. For me, I originally knew that the nature of witches was going to be heavily rooted in nature. So when system, it just made sense to me that witches would be the characters of the story, because whenever I think about witches, I think of them as people who are just deeply connected to the natural world. And so when I was starting to think about who would have magic that was connected to the seasons, what kind of person would that be, it made sense that they would be witches, because witches fundamentally are so connected to the earth. So that's really how I came up with that aspect of like the witchcraft, was wanting to center people who were very already connected to nature. And then I chose the setting of the story mainly because I wanted it to be in a place that experienced all 4 seasons. The Pacific Northwest, we kind of have like 9 months of gray and then the summer. And so I wanted it to be in a place that had like 4 distinct seasons, which is why it is set in Pennsylvania.
I was wondering, since Charleston doesn't really have seasons, if that was one of the reasons that you chose Pennsylvania specifically, was because you needed that atmosphere, which makes sense. Kind of along with that, how did your like world building come to be with, like, I know you were saying that you wanted the specific season witches to have specific characteristics, and like how deep did you go into that dive of the
So that was like my favorite part of the magic system. I just had so much fun trying to think about if I were to personify the seasons, what would they be like? And that was really how I figured out the magic system of the world is, if winter were a person, what kind of personality traits would that person have? What would that magic feel like? And similarly, how is spring different? How would spring feel different if people were exhibiting personality traits based off of a season? What would springs be like? And so that's really how I tried to come up with the magic system, was just if I could turn the seasons up to 100%, like, you know, magnify them up to 100, what would they be like? And that's really where I started in terms of coming up with the magic systems.
And Alexis, your magic, or the folkloric magic in your book is, did you intentionally like kind of stay away from it because you want it to be much more mysterious, or did you do more background research and just didn't put it in the book?
Kind of both. So since my book is like kind of on the scarier side in horror, I think that I knew that if some of the source of the horror came from the magic system, that I couldn't reveal all of it, because I had to have a certain amount of distance to create this kind of like sense of like mystery and dread and sinister horror. So I sort of didn't delve deep into like the specifics of how the magic is practiced. Emmanuel learns some through the course of the book, but not everything is explained. That said, I did do research. I researched how witchcraft is practiced in our world. I kind of dabbled myself, but I didn't draw direct inspiration from any one practice, just because I sort of felt like that wasn't my place to take real people's practices and sort of insert them directly into my book. I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that. It's just that I wasn't in a position with my own practice and learning where I felt comfortable doing that, like I could do it justice. So I tried to kind of create my own loose folkloric sort of representation of witchcraft for the year of the witching.
So you said you've dabbled and you're in progress of learning witchcraft as well?
Yeah. So I think it sort of started with like loose divination, tarot decks and stuff like that. I collect them. A lot of things like that. I would buy a lot of books on witchcraft, which I still have. And I kind of did some like small scale like spells. At one point my dad was convinced that I had cursed our house because like books started flying off of walls and like glass like vases started like falling and breaking when like no one was in the room and no one was around. I don't think I did anything harmful, but yeah, it was certainly like a learning experience for me, and it was cool to kind of like live the experience of the book, because Emmanuel also, it's like her first time practicing witchcraft and really exploring that realm of spirituality. And so I felt like we were kind of going hand in hand through that experience together.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, now I just have to ask Rachel, did you dabble in any witchcraft when you were doing research for the book?
You know, I didn't, because I knew the book came to me initially as the idea was like a girl who changed with the seasons. So tying it to witches actually didn't come until later in the development process. And so really all of my research revolved very heavily around nature and weather in particular. So I ended up becoming a certified weather spotter with the National Weather Service to like learn, you know, a bunch of stuff about the weather. So that was really where I focused my research.
That is one of my questions, and I guess I'll just jump into that side of it. For the research side of things, since we're already on that, one, what does it mean to be a weather spotter? And two, the scenes with the weather manipulation in the book are so good. I was like, how did she, like, you can tell right away that you are so knowledgeable about it. Like, yeah, I mean, how many times do you have to write those? Did you get it in one go? Did you have a lot of editor help? I mean, they're so good.
Yeah, I thank you. I did a ton of research on the weather. And so I was initially just reading a lot of books and doing a lot of research online. And then actually, as I was drafting this book, my husband actually saw that our local airport was having a class there hosted by the National Weather Service to become a certified weather spotter. And so I jumped at the chance to take this class. And basically what it is you go and learn how to look out for signs that we're about to experience severe or extreme weather. So certain cloud types that would lead to, thunderstorms or tornadoes, hail, sleet, snow, those sorts of things, because the National Weather Service has a lot of weather stations across the country, but they can't be everywhere. So weather spotters kind of serve as the eyes and ears of the National Weather Service on the ground. And so I took a lot of what I learned in that class and tried to weave it directly into the magic system of the book. I really did want to take readers like into the eye of the storm and show you what it's actually like to watch a thunderstorm transform into a tornado, but I wanted to wrap it in magic. And so the experience itself felt more magical instead of technical. So that's really how I focused my research. And it did take me a while to get it right, but I'm really excited about how it turned out. I love the weather. I've been really fascinated and obsessed with it since I was a little kid. So it was just really cool to be able to add in a lot of those details to the story.
They shine through for real. It's one of like the best parts of the book, I think, are those scenes. I mean, I remember reading the first one where she's trying the tornado, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're learning about, I was like, I'm learning the weather now.
Thank you.
So for both of you, do you have a most interesting fact you uncovered when you did your research? And I guess, Alexis, you mentioned that you did you have to do like more historical context, even though your world is technically not ours? Did you based it on like puritanical type system? So yeah, I mean, do you want to start anything that you found that was most interesting from your research?
I'm trying to so I did a lot of research and I didn't find too much that like really like shocked and surprised me when I was like digging for it myself. However, people, while I was writing the book, when I was writing it, would come to me and just give me like random weird like creepy tidbits and be like, oh, I heard this, and those were the things that ended up sort of taking me by surprise. So my favorite example of this is kind of grim, so I'm sorry, but my favorite example of this is my friend Bill grew up on a farm, and he told me that if you whack a chicken's head off, the body will run one way, and like it would kind of like stay animated. And I was horrified, and I was so horrified that I actually put it in the book. And so that's like the scene where Martha's making dinner. And I know that isn't like witchcraft-y, but I was shocked by it. And so those were the sorts of things that sort of that sort of occurred while I was writing the book. I do feel like it was kind of like a think tank in a way, and like everyone was sort of like contributing. And
that was so cool, because I feel like that added, like, it is this thing that actually happens, but it adds so much creepiness to it. Like, it completely fit. It's like this very eerie thing. So, yeah, I think it really works.
Thank you.
Rachel, did you find anything in your weather research or other research that really surprised you?
Like really cool weather phenomenon, right? Like, you can get like basically a water spout over the ocean if there's like a tornado that drops and picks up all this water, and then you have this like tunnel of water flying up into the sky over water. It's really, really cool looking. Or you can also get flames that do that. And so it was just like really cool, interesting weather phenomenon that I was not familiar with, A, because it's rare, but also B, I live in a very mild, climate. So we don't have things like that. And so it was just learning about these really cool things. I also did research because a solar eclipse plays a big role in the book, and just learning all of the traditions and folklore that surrounded eclipses, hundreds of years ago was really interesting. There were so many different, cultures that had different beliefs around what could be causing the eclipse. And those were really interesting, but it was all kind of around the weather and things like that.
This one is sort of related to research, but I guess it doesn't have to be any specific research. But was there any piece of your book that didn't make it into the final cut that you really wished had, or something you didn't even get to write about in it because you know, various things happen. Any like nugget that you wanted to have in there that didn't quite make it in? Maybe Rachel, if you want to start.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say this is research related at all, but and I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm sad it's not in the final book because it needed to be cut. It didn't have, you know, as I was revising, the scene didn't really have a place in the new version, but there is this scene in one of the earlier versions where Sang, who is the love interest of the book, has written this children's book, and he reads Sarah some excerpts, and it was called Danny the Dandelion is Not a Weed. And he wrote this book as like a way to help his nephew who had been kind of being teased at school. And so he wrote this book about a dandelion who is not a weed, and he's actually a beautiful flower. And I was like very attached to this picture book that, you know, I had excerpts of in the book, but it didn't make it to the final version. Like I said, because we did a lot of restructuring, but that's like one part of the book that I'm like, oh, that was really cute.
For me, okay, actually, I need to circle back. I really want you to write this picture book. Like, when you were telling me, I'm like, this sounds really, I want to buy that for my like little cousins. It sounds so cute. For me, I think almost all of the scenes that I'm like kind of like sad about cutting, even though I know they needed to be cut, or like kind of pointless flirtation scenes between Ezra and Emmanuel, my main character and her love interest. And so yeah, there was like one scene where like Ezra was pretending to like pray in this little chapel, and Emmanuel was there, and they were pretending to pray, but they were really just like bantering and flirting back and forth, but they knew they weren't supposed to be, so they just acted like they were praying for each other. So yeah, I thought that was sort of fun. I love like the banter flirting scenes, but they never end up having a point, so I'm always trying to sneakily attach them to the plot so that way I can keep them in. But with that one scene, I wasn't successful, so it had to be cut.
Oh, I love the like little flirtation scenes, and they're hard to let go of when you're like, but this is the whole point, that they're just, I know it doesn't have a point other than they're just flirting, but I really like this scene. So yeah, those are always fun. Yeah.
I'm in that camp where I'm like, everything in the book exists to make these two characters kiss. Like yeah. Even though I know that like it's supposed to have a plot, the plot that I'm focused on is always the romance. So
I know,
yeah.
Same.
Unscripted question: Do you both like writing the romance portions? I mean, the part building up to it, but then, yeah. Do you enjoy like the kissing scenes, or do you hate writing them, or I don't know?
I love them. I feel like I feel like all of those scenes are kind of like little rewards sprinkled throughout the book, and I'm like writing toward them. I will say though that they take me a long time because I'm always like thinking about, okay, what are hands doing right now? We're like, what direction? Like, I'm always trying to like figure out the blocking of the scene. And so they actually take me a long time to write because I'm trying to get them right. But I love romance. I love those little moments between two characters. And so those are like candy to me. And so I always get excited when I get to write them.
Same. I love them so much. Like, I feel like one day I'm just gonna like write straight up romance because I really, really enjoy writing romance. But I agree, like the difficult part is the choreography. Like it does require a lot of thought and a lot of plotting when there's like action parts involved. But I just think it's so fun, and I agree, it is kind of like a reward or a treat or something that just feels like a real reprieve from like the heavy, like plot focused, action focused stuff of the book. It's like I have a hard time even envisioning like writing a book without romance because I just love it that much. And sometimes when I'm starting projects, it's like I get an idea and I'm like, okay, well, like who's the love interest? As if, you know, there has to be one. And I think that's just because I know how much I enjoy writing those parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the same way.
That's so fun. I like, some authors don't like to, they like the romance part, but they don't like actually writing it. And they're it's fun to hear their answers. Y'all's answers are also fun. I enjoyed them. Okay, so I mean, sort of along the same, well, not the romance vein, but in terms of like structure and like research and things, I thought it was really interesting. And I mean, a lot of books do this, I guess, but it was fun when I was, prepping my questions for it, that that both of you all do epigraphs for your chapters from fictional works from within the world. So how, and yours, Rachel, are all from the same book, A Season for Everything. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then Alexis, yours come from like several different sources, like the prophets and then the Holy Scriptures and things like that. How much did you fully flesh out these writings, or just got the quotes from them? I mean, how were you able to extract what to put in as the epigraph? I guess is my overall question, as far as you'd like to take it. Maybe Rachel, if you want to start.
Yeah, so the epigraphs were not in my first draft, and it was actually one of my beta readers who suggested using epigraphs to kind of ground us more in the magic system of the world. And so I loved the idea, and I wrote them in. I wrote a lot of epigraphs that did not make it into the final book, but I didn't write like big scenes from the book A Season for Everything that the epigraphs are from. What I really wanted was epigraphs that had a different tone from the rest of the narration, because I wanted readers to wonder what this book is and where this book is from. But I also wanted them to kind of reflect what was going to happen in the chapter a little bit. And a lot of them are more metaphorical. They're not, this literal representation of what's about to happen. But I wanted them to be connected in some way to the chapters themselves and the scene that we were about to experience. So that's really how I went about them. I will say I did write all of the epigraphs together because it's kind of a different voice than the rest of the book. And so I wanted to kind of stay in that space, but I didn't actually write like whole scenes or anything.
For me, it was sort of similar. They're just bits and pieces. I never wrote out like the whole Holy Scripture. I mean, that would take forever. Like, I don't think we can pay enough money to do that. But it was important to me that they sort of kind of follow their own narrative arc. So I have different sources. I have letters between Emmanuel's parents who are dead, and so you see their romance sort of unfold through the course of these little epigraphs. You can actually kind of sort of track the plot if you just read their letters to each other. And then with the Holy Scriptures, I kind of wanted to start similarly, where it's like, oh, things are kind of going well. And it's like a narrative, like you're learning more about this religion, and the more you read, the more you realize the religion at its core is like fundamentally flawed and sort of dark and twisted. And so I wrote them in a different voice, because I wanted to, like Rachel said, similarly expand the world and kind of show, have, I guess, a broader view of the people who are participating in this world that we don't necessarily get to see in the page. So there's like a lot of like historical figures, and I feel like it's such a good world building hack, because that space is just empty space being like, yeah, like it's used just to sort of like, I mean, most people, like, most books, you can kind of insert them. But I feel like they carry so much weight when it comes to like the world building and how much you can expand the world just by these like short little like sentences at the beginning of chapters. I know N.K. Jemisin does a fantastic job, but she puts her epigraphs at the end of her chapters in the 5th season. And I also think that that's like so brilliant. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with them. And I thought it was so cool when I picked up The Nature of Witches, and I was like a fellow enthusiast.
I know. Oh, when I was reading your book, they like set such an amazing tone too, right? Like you're able to like get the atmosphere and tone you want. And I loved the epigraphs in The Year of the Witching. They added so much to the world. The letters. Oh, I love the letters, but they just added so much to the world. And I totally agree with you. They're like this amazing world building hack that I'm like, oh, great. What an easy way to like sprinkle in more information about the world.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think at this point, I love them so much. I'm close to kind of like reading books just because they have them. I don't know. There's something about it.
That is very true. And I agree. I like the phrasing that it's a world building hack because it does. It gives it so much depth. And you're like, oh, there's this whole literature behind everything that's happening. It's so good. So kind of related. Well, this kind of brings me into my other question about y'all's two main characters, which on the surface, I suppose are kind of seem pretty different. But when I was kind of thinking about them together, I was like, they actually have a lot in common. Both of them lost their parents pretty early. They are both like struggling with like figuring out who they are to like help their society for the greater good. So I thought that was so interesting. And how did you like develop or what did you see as the main driving force of each of your main characters, Clara and Emmanuel, and how did you develop that and tease it out of them? Alexis, do you want to start off?
I think that the driving force behind Emmanuel was this kind of like earnest or even naive belief that, you know, she could affect great change, you know, for the better and help the people around her. And I say naive because she's at a really kind of like low place in her society when the book begins, but she has this like earnest belief that she can help people, and she just, you know, won't rest until she's done that. And so it was something I really admired about her character and something that was kind of at the core of her being. And when I picked up The Nature of Witches, I felt the same for Clara. I was just like, I love a character that has this like earnest heart to like help people. And so, I definitely felt like the characters were similar in that way. I think that if they were to meet, they would be like friends for sure.
I think so too.
I thought, right? I was like, I can see them like fighting alongside each other. I loved Clara so much. But yeah, I think that sort of heart is what how I kind of crafted Emmanuel and crafted the whole book. Really, I feel like that's her beating heart, is helping people. So that was at the forefront of my mind while I was writing.
Yeah, I actually love this question because I completely agree. As soon as I read this question, I was like, she's totally right. There are a lot of similarities between Emmanuel and Clara, and I do think they'd be friends if they were to meet and live in the same world. So I think this is such a fun question. I think for Clara, like and I've talked about this before, you've seen on other events or on Instagram, but like, it's really important to me. So I always say it, but I think for Clara, she starts the book out with beliefs about herself that other people have told her. She is too sensitive. She is too powerful. She is too dangerous. She's too emotional and too in her head, and she changes too much. She's too much in general. And I wanted really the driving force of her arc to be reclaiming these things about herself and being able to spin them and find strength in them instead of the weakness that she's been told she is. You know, that somehow being sensitive is equal to weakness, or being, you know, really in your head makes you weak. That's not true. And so what I really wanted was her to go on this journey and reclaim like those parts of herself that she had let kind of other people inform the way she viewed herself. And so that was really what I wanted her journey to be like, because like Emmanuel, she really wants to help people, and she has this ability to. She is powerful, and yet she believes, and for some reason, some reasons she believes this are very reasonable, like the fact that she has hurt and killed people in her past when her magic gets out of control. But she wants to help people, and in her core, she really does believe that there should be a reason for her magic being as big as it is. And the book is really about her finding out that reason and then being able to embrace it.
That's such a good point. I mean, that in the book, she is, just reacting at the beginning to everything people have said about her. Seems very strong, but very held back by these like limitations. It's a great character arc. I loved it. And
thank you.
I reminds me of Emmanuel, because in the beginning she is even just called a curse. Like she's always been considered you know, a curse to her society. And yeah, I'm just like, now I want to go back and read them both side by side and be like, let me just
yes, because like Emmanuel is so powerful too, and she believes that her power is a curse, and so there's just like a lot of parallels that I think are really, really cool.
Yes.
I agree.
I want to give a quick reminder to everyone. In about 10 minutes, we're going to open the floor to the questions. And I know some of you guys have put stuff in there. We've got the questions from you already, but anyone else who's out there stewing over a question, now's the time to start getting it together. Throw it in the chat. We'll get it. Yeah, and like I said, in about 10 minutes, we'll do the Q&A from the audience. But I do have a few final things. Well, still kind of on the topic of characters, of your main characters. Do you think that you wrote any of yourself into the character, or did it happen by accident, or did you intentionally try to make her very different from you? Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Or has anyone told you something opposite of what you thought you did?
Yeah, I'll start. Yes, like Clara, unfortunately for her, got a lot of my deep-seated insecurities and fears. I am a very, very sensitive person, and I have been that way my whole life. And I spent a very large portion of my life believing that sensitivity and being in your head and were bad things, and that they were weaknesses, and that they were things that I needed to try and fix, even though they're completely core to who I am, and I would have no idea how not to be as sensitive as I am. And so that part of the story really did come from my own experiences in terms of recognizing these things in myself that I had been told were bad, starting from a very young age, and then being able to embrace them and see them as strengths instead.
For me, Emmanuel was, in many ways, for better or for worse, she's a kind of a reflection of my own upbringing, and some of the things that I grappled with. I haven't experienced like the level of trauma, or especially like religious trauma, that Emmanuel has experienced, but I've experienced some, and I had, you know, my own crisis of faith around the same time that Emmanuel did. And so I did put a lot of myself into that character, which was terrifying and still is, because I think there is something to be said for like quite literally like putting your softest, most like vulnerable parts on the page. So like I totally relate, Rachel, to that. It is so scary.
So scary.
It's terrifying. And it's hard because if someone critiques the character, it begins to almost feel like a personal critique. And then it's hard to sometimes create that distance between you and this character. But yeah, I think that almost every character, apart from the really bad ones, like not the prophet and some of like the really evil characters in my book, but I think I put a little bit of myself into all of my characters, but Emmanuel especially. I think that I really related to her sort of coming into herself and beginning to question the world because of this crisis of faith, and then finding new ways to access a sense of like spirituality or power and connection to the world around her and the people that surround her. So yeah, I definitely put a lot of myself into Emmanuel for sure.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on that. The final character thing I'm going to ask, I promise. Do you have a favorite character of who you've written in your book?
For me, it's probably Lilith. I like a villain. So, and just the aesthetics, like the Lilith is my witchy antagonist, and she's like a woman with a deer skull for a head, and I'm like, that sounds fantastic. I just feel like she doesn't have anxiety. Like she's just like dwelling in the woods. Is she a little evil? Yes, but she seems, you know, I don't know. I am kind of attached to her, even though she's quite vicious.
I have to say Clara, I think my main character, just because she's a very sensitive soul, and I recognize that a lot in myself, and I feel very attached to her for that reason.
That makes sense. Okay. I have two final questions, and then that are more like of this world, and then like a quick little, like lightning round of answers. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So what is on your current top recommended? Oh my gosh, what is going on with my verbiage right now? What's your current top recommended reading right now? Rachel.
Let's see. So I just finished Anxious People, which is totally in a different category. Like, it is not young adult, nor is it speculative in any way, but it was just this beautiful, poignant read that I absolutely loved and made my heart feel like it was bursting. I loved Anxious People. I'm very, very excited about the ones we're meant to find. I have not read it yet, but it just came out in May by Joan Hay, and I'm really, really excited about it. It is young adult, it's sci-fi, it deals with climate issues, and so that is one that's on my TBR that I cannot wait to read.
Likewise, the cover blows my mind for that book.
The cover is
it's
so
like maybe
gorgeous.
one of my favorites I've ever seen. I'm like, I want to put it on my wall.
I know, it's so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. So I just started this one, and I can't even really give a synopsis. I'm going in blind with this one, but The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I scored an ARC. Another one of my favorite covers. It's gothic. It's a kind of like gothic horror-y. Yeah, and I'm really enjoying it. I think the writing's really good. It is adult. Do I have a rec? I'm trying to think. Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron is one I keep going back to. Rena's a close friend of mine, so I'm biased in that way, but I think it's a beautiful dark fantasy, and it also, the magic system is built around witchcraft, but it's like witch doctors, and it's an African-inspired magic system. It's quite cool. So yeah.
Sorry, I was just rapidly typing those down so we can like send it out in the final email to everybody. I loved Anxious People too. That was so good. And now I've got Death of Jane Lawrence on my to read. Yes, that sounds great. Okay, so for the rapid fire, I guess one of you will be advantaged because someone has to go first. Do you have a preference? Maybe?
Rachel can go. You go.
I will go first.
Okay. I guess it's sort of supposed to be like your immediate first answer, right?
Okay.
If you were a witch, what would your familiar be?
I have no idea. I don't think I know what a familiar is.
I guess it's like
Little
your
witchy
animal.
pet.
Yeah.
Oh, my witchy pet. An owl.
An owl.
Sure.
Good choice. I'm
An owl
basic
for
black
sure.
Yours is a black cat.
Yeah, keeping it simple. I love black cats, so it'll match.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite witchy book?
The Wicked Deep and The Year of the Witching.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, I love The Nature of Witches so much. I was just gushing about how it's like my absolute favorite magic system. So definitely The Nature of Witches and Witch of Blackbird Pond. From back in the day, I love that one. That was kind of like a fundamental witchcraft book for me. So
that's so true. I'm like, everyone virtually raise your hand if you've read The Witch of Blackbird Pond as a small child.
I love
We're all here right
now.
Okay, last one. Are you a Jillian or a Sally?
Oh, I'm Sally.
Sally.
Sally, I think.
Magic. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, I think I know. Wait, which one was Sandra Bullock?
Sally.
Okay, I think I'm a Sally, but a little Jillian on a bad day.
A little. We're all a little Jillian. That's great. Okay, I'm ready to dive into the questions from the audience. I just want to quickly jot down this last one we got in. Okay. So our first question came from Kristen, and she wanted to know, have you guys read the All Souls Trilogy by Diana Harkness? And she especially wanted to know Rachel, if you had any inspiration from that, because there's one of the main characters in that one controls the weather as well.
Yes, I loved A Discovery of Witches. I read it like right when it came out, and it just completely blew me away. I had that feeling when I read it, I think similar to when I read Twilight for the first time, and I'm a little bit older, so I didn't grow up with YA like as you know, a category really. And so when I read Twilight for the first time, I was just like, wow, we can do this. We can center, you know, teenage feelings and emotions and experiences. And I just remember being blown away. I felt this like total magic when I read A Discovery of Witches, just like the romance and the magic of the book. Got completely swept away in. So yes, I have read it. I absolutely loved it, and I've not watched the television show, but I've heard it's good. So, but yes, I really did love it.
I have not read it, but I'm bumping it higher up my TBR because that was an excellent review. It sounds like right up my alley.
Yes, I have not read it, I'll be honest, but I did watch the TV show. Oh gosh, I shouldn't say that, but it is good.
Yeah, I've heard it's really good.
Yeah. Okay, so when you were in your writing process, was there a song that you listened to while you were writing, maybe the whole book or any particular scenes? Do you use music to set the mood, and do you find it helps or not?
Yeah, I for sure listen to music when I'm actually drafting. I cannot listen to anything that has lyrics. But I do find instrumental music that I feel really matches the mood or the tone of the book that or the scene that I'm writing. And but I also build a playlist that does have songs with lyrics that I feel really represent the tone of the book or the feeling I'm trying to get across. And then I listen to that whenever I'm not working. So when I'm making dinner or you know, around the house, and it helps me like stay connected to the world. For The Nature of Witches, the one song that I always feel like I come back to for that book is Poison and Wine by the Civil Wars. I love that song so much. And that has always been what I viewed my song for The Nature of Witches.
So my answer is actually the exact same, like every detail as Rachel. Like I create the playlist, instrumental only for when I'm writing, and then I listen to music with lyrics when I'm just kind of in the process of trying to stay in the world of the book. But my song that I listened to a lot was Seven Devils by Florence and the Machine, because it's so creepy. I love that whole. I know. I was going to ask if you listened to Florence when you were writing this, because I felt the vibes. Like when I was reading your book, I felt the Florence vibes. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I did. I love Florence.
I knew it. I felt I was reading at times, and I swear I was hearing Florence like in the back of my head. I was hearing lungs. Yeah. So good.
I love that.
I feel like we're watching a friendship blossom here. It's so great.
I know. Let me just fangirl over Alexis for the whole time.
I could have easily done the same for you, Rachel.
I know.
I filled up probably more than an hour.
Oh yeah, that's great. Okay, we have our next question is from Rachel. She asked, if you could be any witch, who would you be?
Just in general, or like if I were
parameters? I think in general, any witch who's ever been written about or existed in history.
This might sound a little vain, but because I love nature so much, I want to be a witch in my world. And so in The Nature of Witches, you're born a witch if you're born on the solstice or equinox, and I was actually born on the spring equinox. So in my world, I would be a spring witch, and I feel like I really resonate with that season. So that's the answer I'm going to go with.
This is a half answer, but so I don't know if it fully counts, but Galadriel from Lord of the Rings. Gimli at one point calls her a witch, so I'm gonna say she's a witch. I really like the outfits, I like the hair, and I would really love to live in that like enchanted forest and just like the vibes are immaculate, and yeah, that's what I want.
The vibes are perfect.
Right? I just want to live there so badly. And I love how she just stays there while the world is kind of going to hell. And she's just like, I'm going to float around in pretty dresses. And like, it's exactly where I want to be. So
that was a throwback I wasn't expecting. That's great. From the Lord of the Rings. Okay. Where can you remember? And if so, where were you when you, or what were you doing when you first thought of your main character? This is from Val. She was wondering, she was kind of thinking of when J.K. Rowling came up with Harry Potter's on a Train, kind of hit her instantly. Yeah, if you have a like moment when you like knew who your main character was.
I definitely did. I told this story last night if anyone was at my launch event, but I was driving down the road in winter and I saw a bare tree with a crow sitting on top and thought to myself, seasons are cool. And that was like my first inspiration for the book. I'm like, seasons are so cool. And then instantly I thought, what if there were a girl who changed with the seasons? And that was it. That was the inspiration for it. And it, like, I just totally ran with it.
It's so cool. I was sitting on the edge of my bed and it was nighttime and I was looking outside toward this like pine forest that was on the other side of my house, just like across the street. And I got the image of Lilith, my villain, standing or like kind of like emerging from the forest, and then this young girl sort of crouching at her feet, looking terrified and awed. And I chased that, and that was my first introduction to Emmanuel and to Lilith. So,
oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so fun that you guys remember so distinctly where you were. I guess, I mean, it was a big thing. It's great. Okay, our next question is, this is nice. What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to be a writer?
Let's see. For me, I think there are two things. First, for starters, I think it's really important to learn how to finish a project, a manuscript, because there is so much revision in this industry and in writing in general. Like, one of my favorite things to say is writing is rewriting. And it's so true in this industry. And so I think one of the best things we can do is early to learn how to finish a manuscript. And I think that's really important because it teaches you how to write a book, but even more importantly, it teaches you that you can write a book, and it instills in you this sense of confidence or for me anyway, it gave me this confidence that I didn't have before, because I finished a book and I was like, okay, I've done it once, I can probably do it again. And I got this huge boost from that. So I think that is really important. And then the only other thing I would say is that you are your own best advocate. So when it comes time to querying or, looking at contests or, writing opportunities, like, don't count yourself out, don't self-reject, make other people tell you no, throw your hat in the ring and give yourself those opportunities.
That is such great advice. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself that, like, just play this.
Me too.
It's so good. I think that one of the things that helped me was sort of understanding what I liked and why. And sort of like not judging myself too much for the sorts of things that I wanted to write about or that I felt intrigued by. I think it's easy to get this idea of the kind of author you want to be in your head, and that idea can become so rigid that you stop yourself from writing the things that would give you the most joy. And also just kind of being kind to yourself. Like, everybody writes things that are just blatantly terrible. Much of what I write is terrible, and that's totally okay. Like, it's a natural part of the process to look at what you write and kind of loathe it for a little while. But as Rachel was saying, writing is rewriting, and even the best writers have really terrible drafts that they have to rewrite and kind of cultivate over time. And so I think it's important to kind of be accepting of yourself, your own flaws, and kind of approach writing with humility, knowing that no one writes anything remotely close to perfect on the first try.
It's so true. I love that answer. And I think we were talking a little bit about this last night, but to Alexis's point, when you start like writing what you love and what gets you excited, that's when I feel like everything clicked for me. And that's why I feel like Nature is not the first book that I wrote. It's the third book that I wrote. But I think it's the first book I really leaned into the things that I love. And the things that I wanted to write about. And I think that really clicked for me in terms of my voice and the story I was trying to tell. So I love that advice about just like, you love what you love and, you know, lean into those things.
Relatedly, absolutely. We have also a question of, what does your drafting style look like and how long did it take you to do your first draft?
Alexis, do you want to start?
No, you go. I'm trying to think back.
Okay. I am a very intense plotter. I always like drafting is my least favorite part of the process. I love to revise. I really hate to draft. And so everything I do is in service of getting me through the first draft as quickly as possible. So I am a very intense plotter. I use the Save the Cat beat sheet to start, and then I actually do a full chapter by chapter outline before I ever start writing. I also figure out my magic system and the rules of the world. And by the time I sit down to write, I have a very intense outline ready to go. That of course changes as I draft, right? As you get to know your main characters and, you know, the story changes, but it is very uncomfortable for me to sit down and have no idea what I'm going to be writing that day. I don't like that feeling at all. And so I like to have a roadmap. And so that's kind of how I approach it.
For me, I'm a pantser that wants to be a plotter, and I have all best intentions when I start drafting. Normally I do start, I always start with beat sheet. I find that immensely helpful. I also use Save the Cat. And I try to build that out into an outline, and then normally I get like 30,000 words into the draft, and I somehow end up on a rabbit trail, that leads to another rabbit trail, and then eventually I just kind of wake up one day and the book's done, and it doesn't even resemble a book. It's just kind of like really, really messy. So I do a lot of work in revision, and I do a lot of rewrites to sort of assemble what is essentially a bunch of random scenes into something that resembles a plot. I think that the process probably takes me a lot longer than if I was capable of plotting and outlining. And I'm trying, now that I'm like dealing with like tighter deadlines and stuff, I really am trying to be more diligent about outlining, because I do think that it saves a lot of time and stress if you kind of know where you're going before you start. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then our last question from the audience is, so the first part of the question is sort of towards Alexis, but I think both of you guys could answer the main question. Alexis, your witches are so dark and unique. They remind the viewer of Guillermo del Toro characters. So she's wondering, where did you get your inspiration for those characters? And then Rachel, you can also add in your inspiration.
I love Guillermo del Toro so much. So I'm sure that some part of that, like Pan's Labyrinth is one of my favorite movies. I was just rewatching it for the umpteenth time, like last week. It's a comfort movie for me. And I think his work is amazing. So I'm sure he kind of like had some level of influence. I also just really like horror movies. The Babadook comes to mind. Of course, The Witch, Hereditary, those sorts of sinister, eerie things. I'm always sort of like devouring that kind of content to, you know, use it as inspiration as you do. So yeah, I'm huge fan. I'm always looking for kind of recommendations in that sphere because they inspire everything that I write just about. Yeah,
I think for me, like at its heart, the nature of witches really is a love letter to the earth. And so I drew a ton of inspiration from other things like Mary Oliver's essays and poetry that is so deeply rooted in this gratitude and awe of the natural world. And that was really, I wanted to like infuse my book with that sense of wonder when you think about the earth. And so I drew a lot of inspiration from poetry and essays that reflect on the natural world.
Both of those make so much sense for the two books. It's so great. I was just thinking of, when I read both books, I was like, wow, they're really different styles of witchiness. But having you guys here together has been so, y'all like click so well on so many things. It's just so different expressions of magic all around. It's great. Okay, I want to close with a few little housekeeping things, and then I have a final question, and I swear that's all. So if you didn't join the chat earlier, I did want to say that Rachel's publisher, Sourcebooks, is sending tote bags for everyone who attends one of her virtual events. So I'm going to put the form again into the chat. You can fill out the form, and they'll send you a tote bag. It has pictures of Rachel. Rachel, do you still have the pictures of what's on the tote bags?
So let's see. So the Nature of Witches is divided into season sections, and every season has its own botanical illustration that goes with it. And so the tote bag has all 4 of those botanical illustrations that correspond to each season on it.
Yes. So you can fill out the form and get one of those. And don't forget, you order the book from us or any participating store, you'll get the sticker collection. Mm-hmm. We do have book plates. Rachel, your home indie is Third Place Books.
Yes.
They have signed copies. And Alexis's book, The Year of the Witching, comes out next week. No, the week after next in paperback.
Right? I forgot about that. Yeah. This paperback. Thank you.
The paperback release. Yes. So you can definitely pre-order that with us as well. We will send a final email out to all the attendees to thank you for coming with all of these great book recommendations, links to their books. And then I just wanted to ask you guys before you leave, if you're working on anything right now and like hint maybe a follow-up to either of these books, if you can tell us.
I am working on my next book. It comes out next spring of 2022. It's another contemporary fantasy standalone, but it is also very witchy. This one is set in the Pacific Northwest, and if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I'm completely obsessed with the Pacific Northwest. I've lived here my whole life, and I really, really love it. So it's just like, it's very immersive, similar, like it's a very different book, but it's very similar, and it immerses you in the setting, and is kind of, has lots of fog because the Pacific Northwest has lots of fog, and I love that. And it's just like this moody, atmospheric, very romantic book that I'm excited for when I can share more about.
I don't think I can say too much right now, but the project that's on my mind is unannounced, but it's very bloody, it's gothic, and I've been told it's a little bit of a departure from what I've written in the past, but I hope that readers will still like it and enjoy it. It scared me when I was writing it, so hopefully it'll scare some of you guys too.
Wow, that's really exciting. I can't wait to hear what scared you while you were writing it. Both of those sound great. We'll look out on the catalogs for both of them. Be excited to see more as news is available. And thank you guys for joining us here tonight. We're going to go ahead and end things because we're right at an hour and everybody's got to get back to their dinners and evenings with their families and such. But yes, thank you for all the great questions, folks who tuned in. Don't forget to sign up for your bag, grab a copy of both of these amazing books, and we hope we'll see you in the store soon.
Thank you so much.